They called the meeting for 2 o'clock sharp, but I knew my career was about to end the moment I walked into that conference room with my breast pump bag slung over my shoulder. What I didn't know was that firing me for being a new mother would cost them $47 million and make legal history across 3 states. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I took my usual seat near the back wall. The energy in the room felt different today, charged with the kind of tension that comes before someone's world gets turned upside down. Rebecca Martinez, our Vice President of Operations, stood at the head of the polished oak table, with a manila folder in her hands, and that practiced smile she always wore when delivering bad news. I adjusted my pump bag quietly, checking my watch. It had been 3 hours since my last session, and I could already feel the familiar pressure building. My 6-month-old daughter, Emma, was probably finishing her afternoon bottle at daycare right now, completely unaware that her mother was about to become unemployed. Rebecca cleared her throat and opened the folder. Before we discuss the quarterly projections, I need to address a personnel matter that's been brought to my attention. The room fell silent, except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Several heads turned in my direction, and I felt my stomach drop. Sarah Chen, we've received multiple complaints about your unprofessional conduct and disruption to workplace productivity. My hand stayed steady in my lap, but my mind raced. Unprofessional conduct. I had been with Morrison Financial Services for 4 years, promoted twice, and had never received a single write-up or formal complaint. Your personal activities have created an uncomfortable environment for your colleagues, and frankly, they're inappropriate for a professional setting. She paused, letting her words hang in the air like smoke. I knew exactly what she meant by personal activities, but I wanted to hear her say it. I stood slowly, my voice calm and measured. Are you referring to my legally protected right to express breast milk during my designated break times? The question cut through the room like a blade. Rebecca's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered her composure. This isn't about rights, Sarah. This is about maintaining professional standards and respecting your coworkers' comfort levels. You've been using company property inappropriately and monopolizing shared spaces for personal needs. Her words were carefully chosen, scripted even, but I could hear the nervousness underneath. I had been expressing milk in the small storage room next to the break area, a windowless space barely larger than a broom closet that Rebecca herself had suggested when I returned from maternity leave. It had a lock, an electrical outlet, and enough privacy to pump without anyone seeing or hearing anything. But apparently, even that was too much accommodation for Morrison Financial. Your employment with Morrison Financial Services is terminated effective immediately. Please gather your personal belongings and surrender your keycard and company equipment to security. There will be no severance package due to the nature of your dismissal. The words hit me like physical blows, but I kept my expression neutral. Around the table, my colleagues avoided eye contact. Some stared at their phones, others shuffled papers unnecessarily. These were people I had worked alongside for years, shared coffee with, celebrated birthdays and promotions with. Now they sat in uncomfortable silence while I was publicly humiliated for the crime of feeding my child. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, opening the voice recording app I had started using weeks ago when the complaints about my pumping began. The red record button had been active for the entire meeting. Every word, every accusation, every violation of federal law was now documented in crystal clear audio. Thank you for your time, Rebecca. I'll be sure to share your reasoning with the appropriate authorities. I stood and walked toward the door, my heels clicking against the marble floor with each deliberate step. Behind me, I heard whispers starting, but I didn't look back. The security guard, Mike, was waiting outside the conference room with an empty cardboard box. He had always been kind to me, often asking about Emma and sharing pictures of his own grandchildren. Today, his eyes were full of sympathy and embarrassment. I'm sorry about this, Sarah. This isn't right, he whispered as we walked toward my cubicle. I nodded but didn't respond. There would be time for anger later. Right now, I needed to focus on gathering evidence and protecting my family's future. My cubicle was exactly as I had left it that morning. Family photos. A small plant Emma had given me for Mother's Day. My law degree hanging in a simple frame on the partition wall. Yes, I had a law degree, something my colleagues and supervisors seemed to forget when they assumed I would quietly accept whatever treatment they decided to dish out. I had graduated from Northwestern Law School 7 years earlier, but chose to work in corporate finance instead of practicing law. The hours were more predictable, the stress level lower, and the pay was steady. I thought I could have a normal career and a family without the brutal demands of a law firm. How naive I had been. As I packed my personal items, I mentally reviewed everything that had led to this moment. It started 6 weeks ago, on my first day back from maternity leave. I had approached Rebecca about setting up a private space for pumping, as required by federal law. She had rolled her eyes and sighed dramatically before showing me to the storage room. "It's not ideal, but I suppose it will have to do," she had said, as if she were doing me an enormous favor instead of following the law. The room was barely adequate, with no proper seating and poor ventilation, but it was private and had the electrical outlet I needed for my pump. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. For 2 weeks, everything seemed fine. I would take my breaks at the designated times, pump for 15 to 20 minutes, and return to work. I kept my sessions brief and efficient, often eating lunch at my desk to make up for any lost time. My productivity actually increased after returning from leave, as if I were trying to prove that being a mother hadn't diminished my professional capabilities. Then the complaint started. Anonymous reports to HR about strange noises coming from the storage room. Concerns about hygiene and contamination of shared spaces. Suggestions that my pumping schedule was disrupting team meetings and project deadlines. Every complaint was vague, impossible to verify, and carefully worded to avoid mentioning the real issue. I had requested copies of these complaints through official channels, but HR claimed they were personnel matters that couldn't be disclosed. I documented every interaction, every denied request, every subtle form of discrimination. My husband David thought I was being paranoid, but my legal training told me otherwise. The final straw came last week, when I discovered that the lock on the storage room had been changed without notification. I stood outside the door with my pump bag, trying my key repeatedly, while colleagues walked past and stared. Rebecca eventually appeared with a new key, claiming it was a security upgrade that had slipped her mind. Inside the room, I found that someone had removed the small chair I had been using and replaced it with a broken stool that wobbled dangerously. The electrical outlet had been covered with tape and an out-of-order sign, forcing me to use an extension cord that barely reached from the hallway. It was clear that someone wanted to make my pumping sessions as difficult and uncomfortable as possible. I began recording every interaction after that, keeping detailed notes about dates, times, and witnesses. I researched federal and state laws regarding workplace discrimination and nursing mothers' rights. I even consulted with a few attorney friends who specialized in employment law, though I hadn't yet decided whether to take legal action. Now, sitting in my cubicle with a cardboard box full of personal belongings, that decision had been made for me. Morrison Financial had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. They had terminated a nursing mother for exercising her legally protected rights, and they had done it in the most public and humiliating way possible. Mike helped me carry my box to the parking garage, his face still creased with worry. "You take care of yourself, Sarah, and that beautiful baby of yours." I hugged him briefly, grateful for his kindness in an otherwise awful day. As I drove home through the afternoon traffic, I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. The initial shock and humiliation were fading, replaced by something sharper and more focused. Anger, yes, but also determination. Rebecca and Morrison Financial had made a critical error in judgment. They had assumed that a new mother would be too overwhelmed, too financially vulnerable, too grateful for any employment to fight back. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a moment, staring at my modest 2-story house. David's truck was already there, which meant he was home early from his construction job. I would have to tell him what happened, explain that we were now down to one income with a 6-month-old baby and a mortgage. But first, I had phone calls to make. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission needed to be notified within 180 days of the discriminatory action. The Department of Labor had specific procedures for reporting violations of the Fair Labor Standards Act. And my old law school roommate Jenny, who now ran a boutique employment law firm, had been telling me for months that I should consider returning to legal practice. I gathered my pump bag and cardboard box, straightened my shoulders, and walked toward my front door. Emma was probably wondering where I was, and David would want to know why I was home 3 hours early. There would be difficult conversations ahead, sleepless nights, and months of uncertainty. But Rebecca Martinez and Morrison Financial Services had picked the wrong mother to mess with. They were about to discover that sometimes the person you underestimate most is the one who ends up costing you everything. The house was quiet when I opened the front door, with only the soft sound of Emma babbling in her bouncer and David's muffled voice on a work call in his home office. I set down my box and listened to my daughter's happy sounds, feeling my body respond with the familiar let-down reflex that signaled it was time to pump again. For months I had been made to feel ashamed of this basic biological function, as if nourishing my child was somehow unprofessional or inappropriate. I had hidden in storage rooms, apologized for taking legally mandated breaks, and accepted conditions that no employee should have to endure. Not anymore. David found me sitting at the kitchen table an hour later, still in my work clothes, with legal documents spread across the surface like battle plans. Emma was sleeping peacefully in her swing nearby, completely unaware that her mother had just declared war on corporate America. "You're home early," he said, loosening his tie as he surveyed the papers. His expression shifted from curiosity to concern as he read the headers on the documents. Employment discrimination, federal labor violations, civil rights. "What happened today, Sarah?" I told him everything. The meeting, Rebecca's accusations, the termination, and most importantly, the recording I had captured on my phone. David listened without interruption, his jaw tightening with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, processing the full scope of what Morrison Financial had done. "They fired you for feeding our daughter," he said finally, his voice barely controlled. "They actually fired you for being a mother." The next morning, I called the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and filed a formal complaint. The intake specialist, Maria Rodriguez, was thorough and professional, asking detailed questions about the timeline of events, the company's policies, and the specific circumstances of my termination. "This is a clear-cut case of pregnancy and sex discrimination," she told me after reviewing my statement. "The Pregnancy Discrimination Act protects nursing mothers, and the Fair Labor Standards Act requires employers to provide reasonable accommodations for expressing breast milk. Your employer violated federal law." Maria explained that the EEOC would investigate my complaint and attempt to mediate a resolution with Morrison Financial. If mediation failed, I would receive a right to sue letter, allowing me to pursue the matter in federal court. The process could take months, but my case had strong legal merit. That afternoon, I drove to the law office of Jennifer Walsh, my former Northwestern classmate who specialized in employment discrimination. Jenny had built a reputation as a fierce advocate for workers' rights, taking on cases that other firms considered too risky or time-consuming. Her office was located in a converted Victorian house downtown, with hardwood floors and tall windows that flooded the space with natural light. Jenny greeted me with a warm hug, but her expression turned serious as I explained what had happened at Morrison Financial. "Sarah, this is exactly the kind of case that changes workplace culture," she said after listening to my story and reviewing the documents I had brought. "We're not just talking about wrongful termination here. This is systematic discrimination against nursing mothers, and it needs to be exposed." Jenny explained that we could pursue multiple legal strategies simultaneously. The EEOC complaint would proceed on its track, but we could also file a state discrimination claim and explore federal civil rights violations. Morrison Financial's actions violated several laws, giving us multiple avenues for seeking justice. "But I need to be honest with you," she continued. "This kind of litigation is expensive and time-consuming. Corporate defense attorneys will try to drag this out, hoping you'll settle for pennies on the dollar. They'll attack your character, question your motives, and make this process as painful as possible." I looked at Emma, who was sleeping in her car seat beside my chair. 6 months ago, I had brought this tiny person into the world with such hope and optimism. I had believed that being a working mother in the 21st century would be challenging but manageable. I never imagined that feeding my child would cost me my career. Jenny, I said quietly, I didn't go to law school to back down from bullies. And I'm not going to teach my daughter that women should accept discrimination quietly. Over the next few weeks, Jenny and her team began building our case with methodical precision. They interviewed my former colleagues, requested employment records, and documented every policy violation. Several coworkers came forward confidentially, sharing their own experiences with pregnancy discrimination at Morrison Financial. Lisa Thompson, a marketing coordinator who had returned from maternity leave 2 years earlier, revealed that she had been demoted after requesting a modified schedule for pumping. Janet Rodriguez from accounting described being passed over for promotion after announcing her pregnancy. The pattern of discrimination was clear and extensive. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my professional life. The recording of my termination meeting had been transcribed and legally authenticated. Every conversation with Rebecca Martinez had been documented. I had created a timeline of events that would be difficult for Morrison Financial to dispute or discredit. But the most powerful evidence came from an unexpected source. Mike, the security guard who had helped me pack my belongings, reached out through a mutual friend. He had been troubled by what he witnessed and wanted to help if possible. I've worked at Morrison for 15 years, he told me during a coffee meeting at a diner across town. I've seen a lot of good people treated badly, but what they did to you was different. It was cruel. Mike revealed that he had access to the building's security footage, including cameras in the hallways near the storage room where I had been pumping. The footage would show the deliberate changes made to make my pumping sessions more difficult, including the removal of furniture and the outlet modifications. More importantly, Mike had overheard conversations between Rebecca Martinez and other executives about getting rid of the pumping mother before she became a bigger problem. These conversations had taken place in supposedly private areas, but sound carried in the building's older construction. Would you be willing to testify about what you heard and saw? I asked him. Mike nodded without hesitation. What they did was wrong, and someone needs to be held accountable. Jenny was thrilled when I shared Mike's information. Witness testimony from a long-term employee with no stake in the outcome would be incredibly valuable. Combined with the security footage, we now had objective evidence of Morrison Financial's discriminatory actions. As our case developed, I began receiving calls from other working mothers who had faced similar discrimination. Word about my situation had spread through professional networks and social media, inspiring women to share their own stories of workplace hostility toward nursing mothers. Amanda Foster, a nurse at City General Hospital, described being told to pump in a bathroom because patient rooms were too busy. Catherine Wells, a teacher, had been forced to use her car in the school parking lot because no private space was provided. These stories reinforced that my experience was part of a broader pattern of discrimination. I started documenting these accounts, creating a database of nursing mother discrimination cases across different industries. The scope of the problem was staggering, with thousands of women facing similar challenges in workplaces across the country. Meanwhile, Morrison Financial was taking defensive measures. They hired Blackstone and Associates, one of the city's most expensive corporate defense firms, known for their aggressive tactics and willingness to destroy opponents through character assassination and legal intimidation. Their first move was predictable. They claimed that my termination was performance-related, not discriminatory. They produced a carefully crafted file of supposed performance issues, including subjective complaints about my attitude and collaboration skills. It was obvious that these documents had been created after the fact, but proving that would require extensive discovery. They also began spreading rumors about my mental state and financial motivations. Former colleagues reported hearing whispers that I was an unstable new mother looking for a payday, that my legal background made me opportunistic and litigious. The corporate rumor mill was working overtime to discredit me before the case gained momentum, but Blackstone and Associates had made a critical error. They underestimated the strength of our evidence and the determination of our legal team. More importantly, they failed to recognize that their client had violated federal law in such a blatant and well-documented manner that no amount of legal maneuvering could change the fundamental facts. Jenny filed our federal lawsuit on a rainy Tuesday morning in October, exactly 90 days after my termination. The complaint was comprehensive, alleging violations of the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, the Fair Labor Standards Act, and state civil rights laws. We sought compensatory damages, punitive damages, attorney fees, and injunctive relief, requiring Morrison Financial to change their policies. The local business journal picked up the story that afternoon, running a headline that read, "Financial Firm Sued for Firing Nursing Mother." The article was factual and balanced, but it marked the beginning of public scrutiny that Morrison Financial had hoped to avoid. Within hours, my phone was ringing with interview requests from reporters, employment attorneys, and advocacy organizations. The National Organization for Women issued a statement supporting my case. The American Civil Liberties Union offered to file an amicus brief highlighting the broader civil rights implications. Rebecca Martinez issued a terse statement through Morrison Financial's public relations firm, denying any wrongdoing and claiming that my termination was based solely on performance issues. The statement was carefully worded to avoid admitting any facts while appearing to defend the company's actions. But the damage was already spreading beyond legal circles. Morrison Financial's corporate clients began asking questions about their employment practices. Several major accounts requested meetings to discuss diversity and inclusion policies. The company's reputation as a progressive, family-friendly employer was beginning to crumble. 2 weeks after filing the lawsuit, Jenny received a call from Blackstone and Associates requesting a settlement conference. Morrison Financial wanted to resolve the matter quietly, without the extensive discovery process that would expose their internal communications and decision-making processes. "They're scared," Jenny told me during a strategy meeting. "They know we have them dead to rights, and they want to minimize the damage before more evidence comes out." The settlement offer was insulting: $50,000, a neutral reference, and a confidentiality agreement that would prevent me from discussing the case publicly. In exchange, Morrison Financial would admit no wrongdoing and make no changes to their policies or procedures. I rejected the offer immediately. This case was never about money, though my family certainly needed financial security after losing my income. It was about accountability, justice, and ensuring that other mothers wouldn't face the same discrimination I had experienced. Jenny drafted a counteroffer that was intentionally aggressive. We demanded $2 million in damages, a public apology, comprehensive policy changes, and mandatory training for all supervisors on nursing mothers' rights. We also insisted that Rebecca Martinez be terminated and that Morrison Financial create a fund to support other victims of pregnancy discrimination. Their response was swift and predictably hostile. Blackstone and Associates filed a motion to dismiss our lawsuit, claiming that we had failed to state a valid legal claim. They also began aggressive discovery requests, demanding years of personal records, medical information, and financial documents in an obvious attempt to intimidate us into settling. But we were prepared for their tactics. Jenny's team responded with equally aggressive discovery requests, seeking internal communications, personnel files, and policy documents from Morrison Financial. We requested depositions from Rebecca Martinez, senior executives, and HR personnel involved in my termination. The discovery process revealed exactly what we expected. Morrison Financial had a pattern of discriminating against pregnant and nursing employees, with multiple complaints filed over the years that had been quietly settled or ignored. Internal emails showed explicit discussions about avoiding hiring women of childbearing age and finding reasons to terminate employees who requested accommodations. Most damaging was an email chain between Rebecca Martinez and the company's CEO discussing me specifically. The messages revealed their plan to create a paper trail of performance issues that could justify my termination, despite my excellent work record and recent promotion. "She's becoming a problem with all this pumping nonsense," Rebecca had written. "We need to document issues now before she files some kind of complaint." The CEO's response was equally damaging. "Handle it quietly. We can't afford this kind of attention with the Johnson merger pending." These emails proved that my termination was premeditated and discriminatory, not based on performance issues as Morrison Financial claimed. Combined with the security footage, witness testimony, and my recordings, we had built an overwhelming case for systematic discrimination. As the evidence mounted, Morrison Financial's position became increasingly untenable. Their insurance company began pressuring them to settle, recognizing that a jury trial would likely result in a massive judgment against the company. The potential damages had grown far beyond their original calculations. Media attention intensified as details of the case became public through court filings. National news outlets picked up the story, framing it as a symbol of workplace discrimination against working mothers. Social media campaigns using hashtags like Justice for Sarah and Nursing Mothers' Rights generated thousands of supportive messages. The pressure was building from multiple directions, and Morrison Financial was struggling to contain the damage to their reputation and business relationships. But they weren't ready to surrender yet, and neither was I. The real battle was just beginning. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.